I said the sentence like a flick of lint. That was a lifetime ago. Who even cares? Grant didn't shout. He didn't accuse me of anything dramatic. He just set a printed stack of county records on the counter, slid his key next to them, and said, I do. I care. Then he walked down the hallway and came back with the small things that tell you a person is leaving for real. The phone charger from the outlet behind the couch, the running watch from the entry bowl, the mocha pot we mostly used on Sundays. He looked around the apartment the way you check a hotel room before checkout. I heard myself laugh and it sounded like a car alarm no one intends to turn off. The papers were so ordinary looking they felt dishonest, grainy black and white copies, the county clerk's stamp crooked like a tired signature, the caption line with my name against Evans, docket number, dates. The date was the thing. It wasn't the one I had told Grant. It wasn't the one I had told myself either. It was later. Much later. Messy enough that the overlap between I left my first husband and I started my new life could be measured in months, not the clean, fictionally generous year I had always offered in conversation. Grant had found the records because banks ask nosy questions before they let you owe them money. We were 2 weeks into the house hunt and 3 inches into a joint future. Spreadsheets, a shared Google Drive, pre-approval letters with our names side by side like a temporary monogram. It was mundane romance, Saturday mornings at open houses, whisper arguing about whether the back deck faced west, me bristling at his insistence on a 30-year fixed because rate buydowns are a scam, him making fun of how I said the word mudroom like it was a magic spell. The lender sent a checklist called Things We Need From You, which felt like a joke considering how little either of us liked being told what to do. Pay stubs, W-2s, last 2 years of tax returns, bank statements, any judgments or liens, any name changes, any previous marriages and divorce decrees. I saw the last line and thought, technically, I'm divorced. Technically, it's over. Technically, the beginning and the ending of a thing don't have to be tidy to be true. I scanned the decree I keep in a folder labeled Legal Important because you sound more respectable when you misplace an article. I didn't reread the date. I attached it to the lender's portal. I told myself it was like ripping a band-aid off. Small sting, big relief. Then the process server came to our door on a Wednesday at 6:12 p.m. He said my name and I said yes, and he handed me a manila envelope with Evans' lawyer's letterhead in the corner. Subpoena duces tecum, the top page said, which made me suddenly, viscerally aware that Latin is often a prelude to humiliation. It requested documents related to my income for the last 3 years, communications with a list of names, including grants, and any financial contributions from romantic partners to housing, transportation, or travel during the marriage. The return date was circled in red like homework. In the margin, someone had written, service accepted. I was the someone. Grant read the first paragraph, skimmed the list, stopped at his own name, and looked up at me. Why would he be able to ask for any of this, he said. I heard he and wanted to pretend I didn't know who he meant. Because he's fishing, I said. Because his attorney is being a jerk. It's leverage. It came out too fast, like I'd rehearsed it. Maybe I had. Somewhere in the part of my mind that's always on stage trying to control the mood. Grant set the subpoena down like it might break. Fishing for what? He asked. Spousal support, I said, rolling my eyes to make the word sound silly. In our state, they can consider marital misconduct if it affected finances. Evan wants to argue I dissipated marital assets, which is ridiculous. We split the rent on a 1-bedroom above a vape shop until I moved out. There weren't assets to dissipate. I said it like I'd read it in an article because I had. He asked, moved out when, and I said, when I told you I did. And then the silence did the thing silence always does, it invited the truth to walk in because nothing else wanted to. Here's what I told Grant when we met, Evan and I got married young. We were good until we weren't. We grew apart. I left, got my own place, filed for divorce, healed. It was true if you look at it from 30,000 feet. On the ground, it was a tangle. We were 23 and poor and stubborn. We separated by facing the other direction in bed. We talked about filing, then didn't because the filing fee felt like a month of groceries. We stayed on the same lease because deposits are handcuffs when you don't have savings. We used the same Costco card because breaking up is expensive and bulk toilet paper is neutral. We had sex twice during that in-between time because loneliness looks so much like forgiveness when you're tired. I told myself we were already over, that the calendar date didn't matter. People say we were basically done all the time and nobody yanks a fire alarm. I said it too, and I believed myself until believing me became inconvenient. I met Grant at a trivia night my coworker dragged me to. He had the energy of someone who can fix a toilet and a spreadsheet in one afternoon. He laughed like an apology and stared at the table when he was thinking. He didn't try to be the funniest person in the room, which felt like sleep after a day of fluorescent lights. He asked me out like it was a question and not an audition. On the second date, at a ramen place with stools too short for dignity, he asked about my last relationship. I told him the edited version. We were married, I said. It ended years ago. No kids, no house. Just 2 dumb kids who tried. He nodded. I appreciate the honesty, he said. I took a sip of broth so he couldn't see my mouth lie. That was the first time I told the lie as if I could make it true by speaking it softly enough. It's not like Evan and I were playing house while I dated Grant. We slept in different rooms. We ate at different times. We split the grocery bill without looking at each other's carts. When I finally moved out, my mother drove a borrowed minivan and kept asking, "Are you sure you don't want the colander?" Like the colander was a marriage we could divide evenly. I filed the petition 6 months later, when the money and the courage aligned for long enough to hit submit. We signed a separation agreement we downloaded from a legal website and notarized at a UPS store by a man with a tie patterned like tiny flags. I told myself the marriage had been dead for a year already, that paperwork is a ritual for people who like ceremonies. I said the words we'd been done enough that my tongue stopped noticing their shape. When the lender asked for the decree, I didn't think twice. When the process server asked me to sign for the subpoena, I thought about Evan with his tired eyes and stubborn kindness and the way he could make anything into a bit to keep from talking about something real. I thought about the last text he sent, months back, asking if he could keep the cast iron because he needed something that retained heat. I thought about how we were never cruel, not really. We were just bad at being frank. I told myself he was being petty. I told myself I had not done anything wrong that wasn't already over. Grant did not swallow any of it. He opened his laptop, typed with the calm of a man who has read instruction manuals end to end since childhood, and found the county's public records portal. He typed my name and Evan's and the docket number. He clicked. He scrolled. He printed. He highlighted dates in yellow and blue like we were studying for a test. Then he looked at me and said, "You filed 6 months after we started dating." The sentence made the room shift. "We were separated," I said. "On paper?" he asked. "Not yet, but in real life, yes." He lifted the paper. "In real life, you lived with your husband." "Ex-husband," I said, reflexive and stupid. He set the paper down and said, "Not then." When I said, "It was a lifetime ago, who even cares," I meant please do not take this from me. The future was heavy on the table. Loan pre-approval, listings, a new city where we'd be closer to his sister's kids. I wanted it so badly I thought the wanting could weigh more than the lie. Grant stood there with his charger and his watch and our Sunday coffee pot and said, "I told you the worst thing that ever happened to me on the second date. I told you about my dad leaving and how I learned to read shut doors as early warnings. You looked me in the eye and said you were done with secrets." His voice wasn't loud. It was exhausted. "I am," I said. I was embarrassed. "And I didn't want you to think I was messy." He laughed then, a single sound like a cough. "You are messy," he said. "I am too. The difference is I told you where the mess was." He didn't give me a speech. He did logistics. He called the realtor and said we were withdrawing our offer. He emailed the lender and asked them to remove his name from the application. He texted the baker about the cake testing we'd scheduled for Saturday. Because yes, we'd also put a deposit down at a venue with fairy lights that had made me cry at a wedding expo like someone had pressed an easy button on my heart. He told them to keep the deposit and donate the tasting because he didn't want to fight. He forwarded me the confirmation emails, neat, unemotional. Then he picked up the key and put it in my hand. If you need a place to stay for a week, take the lease, he said. I'll keep the storage unit. Don't worry about my dresser. I'll schedule movers. He said it all like we were separating a drawer of mixed utensils. I wanted to argue that none of this mattered because the marriage had been dead. I wanted to show him receipts of nights I stayed on my friend's couch when Evan had late shifts or when I couldn't stand the sight of the laundry basket we kept bargaining with. I wanted to demand that he factor in intention as if it were a credit score. Instead I said, people get divorced all the time. It's not a character flaw, and he said, divorce isn't. Lying about it is. The next day, Evan's attorney called. She had a voice like a winter coat. Heavy, functional. We received confirmation of service, she said. We'll need your financial affidavit by the return date. Also, please advise your fiancé we don't intend to subpoena him for deposition if you stipulate to dates. He's not. I started, but she kept going. In this state, marital misconduct can be considered as a factor in spousal support, she said, and I could hear her reading from a script meant to scare. We're not alleging dissipation of assets unless you make us. There were no assets, I said, which was true in the way you say we're poor into a mirror so you can keep wearing the same sweater without pitying yourself. Then this should be straightforward, she said. Provide the documents and we'll propose a nominal settlement with a waiver of alimony. The words were kind in a cruel way. They made me realize that my mess was neither unique nor romantic. It was a line item. I did what people do when they're cornered by their own cowardice. I got efficient. I pulled bank statements. I exported pay stubs. I wrote a letter I didn't send to Evan about how there's a difference between marrying the boy who helped you carry a broken couch up 2 flights of stairs and staying married to the man who never learned how to ask for what he needed. I drafted an apology to Grant, edited it down from performances and excuses to one sentence that hurt to write. I lied because I was ashamed. I sent it. He did not reply. The deposition happened anyway. Evan's lawyer asked me if I had dated during the marriage. I said yes. She asked if I had lived with my husband during that time. I said yes. She asked if any partner had paid for my housing or car. I said no. She asked if I had ever shared my location with a partner while still living with my husband. I wanted to argue semantics, to point out that share my location is a phone setting, not a moral one. I said yes. She slid across the table a printout of a photo from my Instagram. A shot of my knees by a fire pit behind a bar, Grant's hand holding a beer, caption, Friday night is for soft light. The date was 2 months before I moved out. I stared at the picture until it looked like someone else's knees. We were separated, I said, because habit is a heavy coat. Not legally, she said. Legally, you were married. That night I texted Grant that I was turning in my key to the apartment office at the end of the month. He replied, finally, with 4 words that felt like a verdict and a mercy, I wish you well. I cried into a towel because paper towels felt wasteful and my cry felt like paying bills with cash. I thought about driving to his place to make a speech about context, but context is what I had already weaponized. It doesn't win you anything when the person you've hurt has set down the argument. He didn't want to debate the shape of the past. He wanted a partner who didn't make him a prop in a story where she always looked brave. For realism, since I know someone reading this will ask, in our state, you can file for no-fault divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences after a short waiting period. Spousal support is not automatic. The court looks at factors like length of marriage, income disparity, and sometimes conduct that affected finances. You can date while separated, no one will arrest you for a beer by a fire pit. But conduct before the official date of separation can matter in negotiations because money is time-stamped. Lawyers ask for pay stubs and bank statements not because they care about your romance but because numbers are the only things that behave in court. We didn't go to trial. Evan and I signed a final decree at another UPS store with a different man wearing a polo with the company logo as if that could be dignity. The decree said each party waives alimony. It said marital property, which made me laugh because it was a list of 3 things, a coffee table, a set of plates, a plant we killed together by watering it on opposite days. Grant didn't come back. He didn't text late one night with a "you up?" disguised as closure. He didn't drop by with a box of my sweaters. He mailed them. He included the save-the-date cards we had ordered. The ones with the photo of us on the shore of the lake his sister lives near, the wind making a joke of my hair. He had written, "Please recycle," on the envelope in his neat print. I stood at the kitchen counter and ran my thumb along the edge of one card until I gave myself a paper cut. It bled for a long time. I googled, "How long do finger cuts bleed?" and then I googled, "How long can you miss a person who chose not to miss you back?" The answers were unhelpful. People were not helpful, I mean. Emily said he was fragile and that men love to weaponize honesty when it's convenient. My mother said, "You always were good at making a story softer than it is," which felt like a kindness wrapped in sandpaper. My therapist said, "What did you learn from his boundary?" And I said, "That love without trust is just marketing." I hated how earnest I sounded. I hated that I had become the person who speaks in sentences that make you want to throw a pillow. On moving day, I found the mocha pot Grant had left me. It wasn't a gift. It was something he didn't need anymore, and that felt like a metaphor I didn't want to hold. I brewed coffee the way he taught me. Patience, low flame, listen for the sigh. I sat on the floor with a mug, surrounded by boxes labeled in thick marker. Kitchen, books, shame. And I wrote him another message I never sent. "You were right to leave," it started. Not because what I did was unforgivable, but because I wouldn't let it be ugly. I wanted you to be grateful I spared you the mess instead of letting you decide if you wanted to live inside it. I folded the paper and put it in a box labeled past that I told myself I'd never open. 3 months later, I ran into Evan outside the grocery store. He was buying charcoal. I was buying strawberries that were on sale because they were slightly bruised. We did the awkward ex thing. "How are you? You look good. How's work? How's your mom?" He said he heard about the engagement. He didn't look smug. He looked tired in the way people look when they've stopped pretending the other person is a villain. "I'm sorry," he said, and I laughed because nothing about any of this was funny. "I am too," I said. "For everything?" he asked. "For some things," I said, because I'm still learning how not to be dramatic. We parted like neighbors. It felt correct. If you're waiting for the twist where Grant shows up at my door because he realized love conquers filing dates. No. He is the kind of man whose word is furniture. Once he says it, you can sit on it. He told me he cared that I lied. He told me leaving was about the lie, not the divorce. He left. He didn't teach me a lesson by punishing me. He taught it by refusing to stay in a life where he had to read footnotes to get the truth. That's how men win in the way nobody writes songs about. They draw a boundary and then live on the other side of it without asking for applause. I tell the truth about dates now. Not because anyone is checking, but because I'm tired of flinching at calendars. When someone asks about my first marriage, I say it lasted 5 years, with 1 year of breaking up while still living in the same apartment because we were broke and stubborn. I say I dated someone before I filed. I say I am not proud of that, and I am not going to die of the not proud feeling. When someone asks about my last relationship, I say we were engaged, and I lied to him about a thing he needed me to be exact about. I say he left and he was right to. I say I am learning that shame is not a strategy. I kept one save the date card because I am sentimental and perverse. It lives in a drawer with my passport and my social security card. The documents that prove who I am and where I can go. Sometimes I take it out and imagine mailing it anyway with a different date and a different groom and a different woman in the photograph. Sometimes I imagine a smaller life than the one I planned, a rental with good light and a parking spot I can reverse into in one try, a job that pays on time, a cat that dislikes everyone but me. Sometimes I imagine nothing. That's new. That's progress. The last time I saw Grant was 6 months after he left. He was at the park with his niece, pushing her on the swing and counting to 10 in a voice like a metronome. He saw me, and all the heat that had been living under my skin for months. Regret, embarrassment, anger at myself dressed up as anger at him. Went still. He waved. I waved back. I kept walking. I didn't go up to him and demand an exit interview. I didn't write an essay in my head about closure and fate. I went home and watered the plant I bought the week after he left and more than once forgot about. It was still alive. That felt like an accomplishment larger than it was. On paper, the only record of all this is a docket entry with dates, a decree that says marriage dissolved, an email that says application withdrawn, a refund policy from a venue that kept our deposit, a chain of messages where a man said I care, and a woman tried to argue calendar math with affection. In real life, the record is quieter, a mocha pot, a key I no longer carry, a habit of checking the year when I talk about the past. It is not a love story. It is a story about what love requires. It requires the truth told in the unit of measure the other person asks for. He asked for dates. I gave him vibes. He chose to live somewhere with a calendar. I don't think I'm a bad person. I think I am a person who liked the version of the story where I was brave and tidy and unburdened. I think I picked that version even when it asked me to stand on a rug whose edge kept curling. Grant helped me see that tripping is not a personality trait, it's a choice. He will marry someone who puts the truth on the counter like salt and flour. Ingredients, not decorations. I hope that when she tells him about her past she uses numbers and names and says the ugly part first. I hope she doesn't need him to be a judge so she can be acquitted. I hope he makes mocha on Sundays and counts to 10 at swings and that the house they buy faces west so their deck gets the kind of light that flatters even the most bruised strawberries. As for me, I am learning the small, boring rituals that make actual change, reading forms, not skimming, saying I don't know yet when I don't, answering questions with answers instead of apologies. I'm learning to let the past be as long as it was. A lifetime is not any period I find inconvenient. A lifetime is what you live through. I lived through a messy ending and a truer one. I keep the county clerk's grainy printouts in the same folder as my new lease. When I touch them, I don't flinch. I remember the sound the mocha pot makes right before the coffee gurgles up. I remember the quiet tilt of a man's head when he is listening hard. I remember the weight of a key in my palm and the feeling of watching someone trustworthy keep trusting themselves. If that's not romance, it's at least a map. It points away from the easy story, toward the one I'll have to earn, one conversation at a time, with dates included and no Latin on the first page.